Pyongyang and Seoul have engaged in yet another fiery war of words following the start of the annual military drills between the U.S. and South Korean troops. The spokesman for the North Korean army has threatened that his country would use its nuclear weapons against the aggressors, quote, in a merciless manner. He said the reaction would be the toughest ever, but did not elaborate. This prompted a reaction from South Korean officials that said they would resolutely punish Pyongyang if provoked. American and South Korean soldiers began their yearly war games on Wednesday. A group of demonstrators gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Seoul to protest the exercises. They said the drills would push the Korean Peninsula closer to the brink of a nuclear war.
10,000 U.S. troops are participating in the annual combined military exercise between Seoul and Washington. The drills got started just 2 days ago amid the ongoing tensions in the region and will continue until the end of April. Kim Jung-soo helps familiarize us with what the drills are all about.
An official from South Korea's Combined Forces Command told reporters on Friday that a combined 10,000 U.S. troops will participate in the annual Fall Eagle exercise, alongside South Korea's 290,000 troops, bringing the total number of participants to 300,000. Of the 10,000 participating American troops, 3,600 service members have been deployed from the U.S. mainland. Fall Eagle is a field training exercise that involves ground, air, naval, and special forces. It is connected to the Key Resolve drills that begin on March 13th. Which are computer-simulated command post exercises conducted by the U.S.-South Korea alliance. It's also been reported that the Nimitz-class supercarrier USS Carl Vinson will arrive in Busan on March 15th to participate in this year's Key Resolve exercise. Many believe the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier has been deployed to send a warning signal to North Korea. Although the bilateral exercises have been carried out numerous times under various circumstances, there is no doubt that tensions are running particularly high this year, in the wake of North Korea's latest missile test on February 12th and the apparent assassination of Kim Jong-nam on February 13th. On Thursday, just a day after the Fall Eagle exercise had begun, North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency issued a statement promising a, quote, merciless response.
Should the U.S. imperialists and the South Korean puppet forces fire even a single shell into the waters where the sovereignty of our republic is exercised, the Korean People's Army will immediately launch its merciless military counteractions.
The United States has taken the unusual step of slamming China for taking economic retaliation on South Korean businesses over Seoul and Washington's decision to deploy a THAAD battery on the Korean peninsula. The U.S. says its commitment to its allies is ironclad, but it remains to be seen whether the Trump administration will step in to help. Connie Kim with the details.
The United States has, for the first time, officially denounced China's retaliatory measures against South Korea's decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system in the country. A State Department spokesperson told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that Washington is concerned and closely monitoring reports that China has taken actions against South Korean private sector entities over the THAAD issue. The spokesperson stressed that THAAD is a prudent and limited self-defense measure designed to respond to a clear and reckless North Korean military threat, adding that criticism or pressure on Seoul to abandon its self-defense would be unreasonable and inappropriate. The official reiterated that the U.S. is committed to defending its allies and will continue to develop a comprehensive set of alliance capabilities to counter the growing threats posed by North Korea's missile programs. While Washington says it's in contact with Beijing at the highest levels, it's unclear at this point whether the U.S. will go beyond its criticism and pressure the Chinese government for its apparent economic retaliation on South Korea.
Today, President Trump promised more warships, planes, and weapons during a visit to America's newest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford.
Nothing symbolizes American military might more than an aircraft carrier, which is why President Trump went aboard the Navy's newest carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, to promote his plans for a military buildup.
We will give our military the tools you need to prevent war and, if required, to fight war and only do one thing. You know what that is? Win. Win. We're going to start winning again.
Our top story this hour, the United States says it has carried out fresh drone strikes in southern Yemen, leaving a dozen people dead. The Pentagon said it pounded Shabwa, Baida and Abyan provinces with more than 20 precision strikes. The Pentagon claims that all of the victims were Al-Qaeda militants. Another U.S. drone attack was carried out in Pakistan's northwest tribal region, killing 2 men riding a motorbike. The U.S. routinely carries out drone attacks in Yemen and several other Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Reuters reports that a suspected U.S. drone strike killed 2 men on Thursday in a Pakistani village near the Afghanistan border, a local government official and a village elder said. U.S. drone attacks inside Pakistan have become rare over the past few years, and the latest strike, if confirmed, would be the first such attack inside the nuclear-armed nation since U.S. President Donald Trump took office in January.
U.S. officials have said faulty intelligence may have caused Russians to bomb U.S. allies in Syria. U.S. military officials reported on March 1st that Russians bombed the U.S.-backed Syrian Arab coalition the day before. According to Reuters, the strike took place near the former ISIS stronghold of Al-Bab in northern Syria. But Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend, who leads the coalition task force in Iraq and Syria, believes the strike was a mistake. According to Townsend, Russians thought they were bombing an ISIS-controlled village rather than one controlled by rebels. Once he told the Russians of the mix-up, the bombing reportedly stopped. While Russia supports the Syrian government, a ceasefire currently in place forbids Russian strikes from targeted Syrian rebels. The Russian Ministry of Defense did not immediately comment on the situation.
7 years after Sweden discontinued compulsory military service, the country has decided to bring back its draft. Starting next year, Sweden expects to conscript at least 4,000 young men and women annually for military service. The country's defense minister cited 2 big reasons for the buildup: Russia's annexation of Crimea and continued Russian aggression in the Ukraine. Even though Sweden has worked with NATO in the past, the country isn't a part of the alliance. That means NATO wouldn't have to come to the country's aid in the event of an incident with Russia. So Sweden has decided it needs to take defense matters into its own hands.
In his joint address to Congress on Tuesday, President Trump took credit for getting NATO allies to spend more money on defense. But one ally doesn't need convincing. Elizabeth Palmer has more on how the Eastern European nation of Estonia is preparing for the worst-case scenario from Vladimir Putin's army.
These may look like soldiers. Actually, they're ordinary men and women with day jobs who volunteer in the Estonian Defense League, a kind of citizens' militia. Here, they're competing in an annual exercise. More than 13,000 of them, prepared to rise up if Estonia were attacked. We asked Aaron Alarikin why they joined.
Because Russia has had some rather offensive rhetoric. And we just saw what happened in Ukraine. Nobody thought it's possible.
He's talking about Estonia's aggressive neighbor to the east, Russia, which in the past 10 years has invaded both the Republic of Georgia and Ukraine. Estonians started to worry that they may be next.
So let's say 5 years ago, nobody even thought, or if you said something like that, you were the crazy person. Now it's like, it happened in Ukraine, it happened in Georgia, why not here?
Estonia has a professional military too. It was on display in this weekend's Independence Day parade. This small country spends big on defense. It's a fully paid up member of NATO, and that buys it powerful friends. This year, U.S. soldiers deployed to Estonia were part of the parade, and for the very first time, they brought tanks.
American tanks on the streets of Estonia's capital send a powerful signal to the people here that the U.S. will stand by its NATO allies. They also send a very clear signal to the Kremlin.
Anyone over the age of 25 here remembers that Estonia was actually ruled by Moscow during 50 years of occupation by the Soviet Union. That ended in 1990. This ceremony honors those who died in the multiple struggles for Estonian independence and no one is prepared to see it threatened again, especially by Russia.
Estonia is not alone.
Margus Tsahkna is Estonia's defense minister.
We're sending the message to Russia very clearly that we are able to speak the same language as Mr. Putin does, and it's a language that we are ready to fight.
And staying ready means constant training. On Saturday, near the town of Voru, women volunteers in the local chapter of the Defense League were in class learning to use GPS equipment. Once they grasped the basics, they took to the forest for a field test. For Ruth Madla, the Defense League is about comradeship, learning new skills, and keeping fit. She doesn't really expect the Russians to invade, but
You're part of this force that sends a message.
And I think maybe it's good to have the message.
that message to Russia is loud and clear. Estonia is spending record amounts on its military, and the defense leagues have never had more volunteers.
ISIS has reportedly set its sights on China. A 30-minute video in which the terror group vows to hit Chinese targets was released on Monday, February 27th. According to the U.S.-based Site Intelligence Group, which analyzed the video, ISIS fighters who are members of China's Muslim Uyghur minority vowed to return home and, quote, shed blood like rivers. An ISIS militant executed an alleged informant after making the threat, reportedly in front of children. The video also reportedly showed armed children executing other so-called informants. Xinjiang province, home to China's Muslim Uyghur population, has experienced violent terror attacks in recent years. China has led harsh crackdowns against the Uyghurs, and some analysts claim the treatment has driven many to join ISIS. On March 1st, China's foreign ministry spokesman Geng Shuang asked for international cooperation, quote, to combat such terrorist forces.
The Gaziantep 1st Border Regiment stand to attention. They're conducting drills at this base on Turkey's southern border. But they're getting a little help defending it. A new wall is being built right across the border with Syria. The aim is to prevent fighters crossing from Syria, as well as stop the flow of refugees.
In 2016, we started building the wall. Because of this wall, the number of people illegally crossing into Turkey is minimal. For example, in 2015, 710 people crossed over illegally, but in 2016 it was 383. So far this year, only 11 people have crossed.
In Gaziantep province alone, 90 kilometers of the wall has been constructed, and 79 kilometers is yet to be built.
So this is the Turkey-Syria border. Just over in that direction is Syria and the town of Meydan Akbis. Now, Meydan Akbis is actually controlled by the YPG, a group Turkey does consider a terrorist organization. But between us is a field full of landmines, an artificial waterway, and a wall, a barrier wall that separates both Turkey and Syria and prevents any infiltration into Turkey.
The landmines have been criticized by human rights organizations who say that they are a risk to civilians. But the Turkish government says that the border isn't completely closed to refugees and that the security measures are designed to prevent the infiltration of terrorists across the border. In addition to the guards watching from the traditional watchtowers, armored cars now patrol the border wall with cameras. All part of a beefing up of security here at the border with Syria, but one that Turkey says is necessary to protect the country from the war next door.
A Mexican lawmaker has climbed the wall that separates the United States from Mexico. Braulio Guerra is seen in a video uploaded on his Twitter account questioning the necessity to spend billions of dollars on a wall.
Hola, amigos y amigas. Hello, friends. I am on the wall, sitting on the wall that divides the border between Mexico and the United States. On this side, Mexico, and on this side, the United States. You can see in this 8 to 10 meters how easy it is to climb up. It would be very easy to jump into the United States, which makes it clear that it is totally unnecessary and absurd to build a wall that costs $15 billion.
The Newton Ards Road
a mainly Protestant area of East Belfast, still bears the marks of 3 decades of conflict. This community was once ruled by gunmen loyal to the British Crown. But the writing on the walls is starting to change, like this symbolic hand of friendship across the divide. This resident lives near a violent interface with the Catholic community.
These are the grills we had in the front for protection. Bottles and bricks were coming flying over from the other side, the interface, and it's only recently we've had our grills taken down, and hopefully now the reconciliation between the two communities are working for peace.
The situation on the ground has been improving, but the government collapsed in January. If the political crisis gets worse, conciliation efforts could be put at risk. George Dorian belongs to the largest unionist party.
The things you see happening in communities across Northern Ireland show that the parties were working together and were delivering on the issues. It's sad that that has been, I hope, temporarily set back.
On the other side of the wall, Short Strand, the main political force here, Sinn Féin, now refuse to go back into government with Democratic Unionists until the concerns are addressed.
After the elections, there will obviously have to be a period of negotiations.
But is the peace process in danger?
No, I believe there's a willingness on all sides to see that peace prevails.
Many voters on both sides are frustrated that politics here are still ruled by the conflict of the past.
I'm hoping politicians can have a look at themselves and look at what the people want. We're still living in a divided society.
Daniel Walsh hopes that these walls can come down in his child's lifetime.
EU lawmakers said in a vote on Thursday, United States citizens should be denied visa-free access to the European Union before summer. The vote came because Washington does not allow some EU nationals to enter there without a visa. As a tit-for-tat measure in Washington's denial of visa-free access to citizens of Poland, Croatia, Cyprus, Romania, and Bulgaria, the European Parliament vote is set to put pressure on the European Commission to enforce a one-year suspension. A Commission official said contacts are ongoing with the U.S. administration to push for full visa reciprocity. The official fell short of saying that immediate action will be taken, however.
French presidential candidate has received a less than friendly welcome while visiting an agricultural show in Paris. Emmanuel Macron here ended up with egg on his face, quite literally, while giving his opinion on farming. He later said it's become something of a tradition. And eggs weren't his only problem as he walked through crowds at the event. After that, Macron was accused by the farmer of not paying taxes. Macron pointed out that people should focus on others who deserve more attention over this question than him.
A long time ago, Lake Titicaca was worshipped as sacred by the Inca Empire. But these days, the shores of South America's largest lake are littered with dead frogs, old tires, and soggy waste. Untreated sewage drains into it from 24 towns and cities. All this is a health hazard to the 1.3 million people in Peru and Bolivia who live near its polluted banks and rely on fishing and farming to survive. Less visible threats lurk in the water, too, as illegal gold mines high in the Andes dump up to 15 tons of mercury a year into a river leading to the lake.
We found in the waters high levels of lead above the permissible levels for human consumption, and in the fish we found high levels of mercury, cadmium, zinc and copper. This is due to contamination, primarily from mining and water discharge, primarily the river which flows into Lake Titicaca.
Pollution also affects tourism. Just a few years ago, the industry was a steady earner for many towns. Now tourist paddle boats are idle, with rubbish gathering all around them. Villagers who live in the coastal hamlet of Coata say they haven't been warned about the dangers lurking in their food and water. Many who live on the 4,000-meter-high plain that surrounds the lake feel government leaders have neglected them. Peru and Bolivia signed a deal in January to spend more than $500 million to tackle the problem. And Peru's new president, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, has promised to build 10 sewage treatment plants, to make one of the world's most beautiful lakes clean again. But that hasn't stopped many from wondering whether they'll continue to be able to make a living from this once sacred lake.
Mentioned this story a moment ago. The governor in the state of Maryland declaring a state of emergency in response to the opioid crisis in America. President Trump now promising to do something about the epidemic, and now the FBI is weighing in as well. Peter Ducey live in Annapolis, Maryland, to report on what the governor is doing there. And how is this different from a state of emergency that you would find for a natural disaster? Or is it, Peter?
It's not, Bill. Governor Hogan is treating it like he would treat a hurricane or a riot like we saw a couple years ago. And he says that this is just such a public health emergency that it needs $50 million over the next 5 years for treatment and prevention. There was a big announcement yesterday here in Maryland where Governor Hogan said this is about taking an all-hands-on-deck approach so that we can save the lives of thousands of Marylanders. Maryland is averaging 29 opioid overdose deaths for every 100,000 people here. That's 14th in the country. And now some Democrats representing Maryland in D.C. are praising the state's Republican governor.
I was glad to see the governor declare this to be an emergency. The opioid epidemic is an emergency, not only in Maryland, around the nation.
And the FBI did say yesterday that a lot of the drugs here in Maryland and elsewhere are coming from Mexico.
The Vatican's commitment to protecting children from abuse by priests is being questioned tonight by an abuse victim who was appointed by the Pope to help end exploitation. She quit at the start of Lent, a period of soul-searching for Catholics, and here's Seth Doan.
And I thought for myself, there's no point in staying.
After 3 years representing church sex abuse survivors on that Vatican panel, Mary Collins quit, citing a culture of resistance at the Vatican.
These men, they thrive on secrecy and cover up, and I thought it was time to move out and be able to speak about it and to let it be known.
Collins does not blame Pope Francis, but rather members of the Vatican Curia, or church administration, saying the lack of cooperation is shameful.
They have the same sort of attitude as the church leadership here had 20 years ago when I was trying to bring my abuser to justice. And it's soul-destroying. It's heartbreaking to see that there are still men with those same attitudes.
Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who heads the commission, said, "We will certainly listen carefully to all that Mary wishes to share with us about her concerns."
You tried to convince Ms. Collins to stay?
Oh, yeah, sure. I tried to convince her.
Father Hans Zollner is a member of that same Vatican panel set up by Pope Francis.
We need to talk about it. We need to face it. But many people are afraid and are reluctant to touch this because this is ugly, this is horrific. Yeah?
And that can lead to this lack of cooperation within the Vatican Curia.
Yes, of course, because you deal with something that you better don't look at.
This is not the first high-profile departure. Peter Saunders, the only other sex victim on the panel, was sidelined last year. It is up for discussion as to whether other sex abuse victims will be invited to join the panel. Father Zollner told us Collins' resignation may be a blessing in disguise because it focuses attention on the issue. Scott, he told us even he is frustrated by the pace of change.
Seth Doan at the Vatican. Thanks.